If you grew up in Britain during the 1980s, you don't need a label to remember the taste of childhood. It lived in corner shops, school lunch trays, and the back of the fridge at home. These groceries weren't just food, they were part of everyday life, bought with pocket money and eaten without a second thought. Many of them are still around today, but the versions you remember quietly disappeared years ago. If these memories sound familiar, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more British nostalgia. So what exactly did we lose? And why do only true Brits remember how they really tasted? 1. Brew, the original 1980s recipe. In 1980s Britain, brew was impossible to ignore. The colour alone was shocking. A bright, almost glowing orange that stained tongues and fingers after just one sip. First produced in Scotland in the early 1900s, brew had long been part of British life, but by the 1980s, its recipe was at its loudest. That sharp sweetness came from artificial dyes such as Pinceau Forat and Sunset Yellow, ingredients later linked to hyperactivity in children. At the time, no one questioned it. Kids bought cans from corner shops for pennies, drank it warm on summer pavements, and never read the label. When food safety rules tightened in the late 1980s and 1990s, the recipe was quietly rebuilt. Brew stayed on shelves, but the version people remember did not. The drink survived. The chaos did not. 2. Lucozade, the yellow cellophane bottle. Lucozade in the 1980s was not a sports drink. It was medicine, or at least it felt like one. The glass bottle wrapped in crinkled yellow cellophane was a familiar sight on bedside tables across Britain, especially during long winters. Parents brought it home for children with flu, measles, or just a bad cold. The drink inside was thick, syrupy, and deeply sweet, designed to deliver glucose quickly. Its bright colour came from dyes later banned for food use. When regulations changed, the wrapping disappeared, the colour softened, and Lucozade was repositioned as a modern energy drink. It still works, people say, but anyone who remembers being handed a warm bottle while tucked under blankets knows the old one tasted different. Comforting, heavy, from another time. 3. Opal fruits, before they became Starburst. Opal fruits were a small pleasure, but an important one. In the 1980s, they came wrapped in paper packets that felt warm in the hand, bought with spare change after school. The flavours were bold: orange, lemon, lime, strawberry, each one coated in bright colour that came from artificial dyes, later restricted in the 1990s and early 2000s. When Mars began switching to natural colours, something shifted. The sweets still existed, but the punch softened. By the time the name changed to Starburst in 1998, the original taste had already gone. Adults today often say opal fruits were better, and they are right. The old dyes gave them a kick. Modern rules no longer allow. What remains is familiar, but gentler, like a memory slightly faded at the edges. 4. Marathon bar, a chew that never let go. Before it was Snickers, it was Marathon, a long, heavy chocolate bar that demanded effort. In the 1980s, the caramel was shinier, stickier, and far more stubborn. That deep gloss came from glazing agents later phased out under new food laws. The chocolate itself used hydrogenated fats. Banned across Britain years later, kids chewed them on football fields, stuffed them into lunchboxes, and pulled caramel from their teeth during lessons. When regulations changed, the bar survived by changing everything that made it memorable. Snickers arrived, smoother and softer, but the Marathon chew, the one that lasted all afternoon, disappeared. The name went first. The texture followed. What remained tasted close, but never quite the same. 5. Panda Pops, neon colours for loose change. Panda Pops were summer in a plastic bottle, sold for pennies in corner shops. They were bought without thinking and shared on the walk home from school. The colours were unreal. Blue raspberry almost glowed. Cherry was a deep, artificial red. Lime looked like liquid neon. Those colours came from artificial dyes, later banned for food use. When the dyes were removed, the drinks lost their identity. New versions appeared, disappeared, and returned again. None felt right. By the time stricter rules arrived in the early 2000s, Panda Pops faded away quietly. What people remember isn't just the taste, but the look. A bottle that felt too bright to be real. A drink that belonged to a time before anyone asked what was inside. 6. Turkey Twizzlers. School dinners nobody forgot. In the 1980s, Turkey Twizzlers were a fixture of British school dinners. Served on beige plastic trays alongside chips and peas, they were loud in flavour and unmistakable in shape. Made with turkey meat, fillers, salt, and additives that were perfectly legal at the time, they tasted unlike anything cooked at home. Children loved them for that reason. They felt indulgent, slightly rebellious. When school meal standards tightened in the early 2000s, particularly after public health campaigns highlighted poor nutrition, the original recipe failed the new limits. Twizzlers were removed almost overnight. Later attempts to bring them back followed stricter rules, resulting in a lighter, softer version. But the ones remembered from echoing school halls, eaten quickly before the bell rang, belong firmly to another era. 7. Wall's Soft Scoop, the freezer staple. Wall's Soft Scoop was a constant presence in British freezers throughout the 1980s. Large tubs sat untouched for weeks, firm enough to require a metal spoon and a strong wrist. The ice cream held its shape thanks to hydrogenated fats, ingredients later banned due to health concerns. That stability meant slower melting, smoother scoops, and a texture many still remember clearly. When regulations changed, manufacturers were forced to rebuild their recipes. Modern ice cream melts faster, feels lighter, and behaves differently in the bowl. Anyone who remembers scooping Wall's straight from the freezer during school holidays knows the difference instantly. The taste is close, but the texture, the resistance, that quiet solidity of 1980s ice cream cannot return. 8. Sunny Delight, not quite orange juice. Sunny Delight arrived in Britain in the late 1980s and immediately caught attention. It looked like orange juice but tasted far sweeter. Children drank it straight from the bottle after school, convinced it provided energy for the evening ahead. Its deep orange glow came from high levels of beta-carotene and additives later placed under strict limits. At the time, few parents questioned it. It was affordable, long-lasting, and appealing. When food regulations tightened in the 1990s, the recipe had to be rebuilt. Sunny Delight remained on shelves, but the thick sweetness and vivid colour softened. What survived was a drink shaped by rules rather than enthusiasm. The original version, bold and slightly excessive, belonged only to that moment in time. 9. Sherbet Dip Dab, the sharpest hit. Sherbet Dip Dab was never subtle. A paper packet of bright powder and a chalky stick, sold in sweet shops across Britain. Children dipped, licked, and winced. The fizz hit immediately. That sharp reaction came from older fizzy agents and bold colourings later removed from approved food lists. In the 1980s, it was part of the fun. Sweets were meant to challenge you, when ingredients were replaced with safer alternatives. The sherbet lost some of its bite. It still fizzes, still entertains. but it no longer shocks. Those who remember the original know the difference. The moment your tongue reacted before your brain could catch up. A brief sting, then laughter. 10. Heinz sandwich spread, the cupboard constant. Heinz sandwich spread was never glamorous, but it was everywhere. In the 1980s, many British households kept a jar ready for quick lunches and late-night snacks. The taste was sharp, savoury, and distinctive, held together by preservatives that allowed it to last for months, unopened. When food laws tightened and certain preservatives were restricted, Heinz quietly adjusted the recipe. The spread still exists, but many insist it used to taste stronger. They are not imagining it. The ingredients that gave it that edge are no longer used in the same way. What remains is familiar, reliable, and safe. But for those who grew up with it, something essential was lost between the jar and the law. What these groceries show us is not just how food has changed, but how everyday life in Britain once felt. In the 1980s, flavours were bolder, colours were brighter, and no one imagined that such ordinary items would one day quietly disappear or be rewritten by new rules. The brands remained, but the versions people grew up with slowly faded into memory. If you'd like to continue exploring forgotten British brands, places, and everyday icons from the 1950s through to the 1980s, click through to our other videos and keep that history alive. And if these stories stirred something familiar, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own memories in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again in the next journey into Britain's past.